Hey friends, it's Simon Hurley and welcome to another video. Today I am so excited because my new collection with Spellbinders and Ranger launches today and it'll become more available to more retailers as the month goes on. This collection features clear photopolymer stamp sets from Ranger that coordinate along with Spellbinders dies, so there's no more need for fussy cutting, and it also has a collection of standalone dies from Spellbinders that work really well on their own or in conjunction with the rest of the release. I don't want to take credit for everything. This release contains artwork from both me and artwork from licensed designers that we've paid to create this beautiful artwork that we've curated into this Christmas release. So I'll have links to everything that I've used down below so you can shop the new release and the other supplies I share. Alright, without further ado, let's get into it. Let's start out by taking a look at the Candy Stripes Coverplate die. I love this one because the actual die has no border around it. So you can take this cover plate and cut it out of larger pieces of cardstock, and you can also repeat the design because there's no edges to it, so you can make it fit on a much larger project like this one. Or you can fit this right inside with the border die, and that's going to cut out an A2 size card panel along with it, which fits really nicely on your card base and cuts out this beautiful textured and striped background. And yes, while this background was based on a candy cane stripe, you don't need to use it in red. Here I used it with a white cardstock to build a tone-on-tone look that I think is just stunning, and you could totally use this all year long. Now the awesome part about this die is if you cut it out twice, you adhere the first one down, and then you take the second one and you actually flip it. It's going to give you the reverse so that they crisscross and create a beautiful plaid on your card making project. You can even see in this example, I used red and green cardstock to create a really great festive and holiday effect. But again, you can use just regular colors of cardstock to make this an everyday look as well. And just remember, the fall season isn't over yet either, so you could totally use some fun oranges and purples, or go with a neutral color palette to make a really beautiful fall looking plaid. Next we have the Floral Stag Die Set. I love this one. It's got a bunch of dies in it to create both an adorable deer and a bunch of different holiday flowers to use on your card making projects. You can use these together to create an array of florals both above or below the deer to create a nice cluster, or use them separately to create more of an elegant card or more of a masculine card. Here is an example with the flowers clustered below the deer to create a really nice arrangement. And you can see this fills an A2 size card really beautifully. But in these examples, I've also taken the florals and clustered them all around the card. These are really easy to build and use as beautiful bouquets for your holiday cards. Now this one is pretty distinctly a poinsettia, but some of these other flowers can be used in summertime or spring, all year round depending on what colors you use for them. Now here I used the deer head alone to fill up a card and create more of a masculine effect. I know lots of you are looking for ways to create masculine designs, and this deer head by itself does just that. I don't like when things are too finicky, so with these dies, we put everything that you need for each individual floral on one cluster. So if you want to cut these out of several colors, just run it through several times and you'll get different colors of each layer. This way you're not stuck with tiny little dies that you're going to lose. Here I'm going to build a poinsettia, so I'll lay that down on a piece of red cardstock, and then I'll use 2 different colors of green to cut out my leaves. And then I'll run that right through my die cutting machine. Once these are cut out, you could totally leave them as is, but I like to go in with inks to bring a little bit of life to these die cuts and make them a little bit more dimensional. So I've used some red cardstock, and now I'm going in with Game Over, which is just a bit darker, and I'm just gonna add a little bit of blending to the edge. This just gives it a little bit of shading, and like I said, it just brings a little bit of life to the flowers. Here you can see it with and without the inking, and you can see a drastic difference in how the edges look. I'll do the same thing with the leaves using a darker green color called Fake Plant. I'm gonna go again in with my blending tool and just blend it on one side of the leaves. You can use kind of a pouncing method if it's a little bit more intricate, and then you can blend right on, and it just brings out some of the details and adds tons of shading. I'm gonna build these right onto a card base just because it's easier to show against the white cardstock. So I'll place down this first layer, which is the largest layer. And for this, you're just going to rotate it so the petals fit right in between and place it down. Super simple. There's also a little center which you can glue down. You could totally leave it here, but there's also little berries you can add down to the center. So I like to just add a really thin layer of liquid glue. This is going to dry clear. And then I'm going to go in with a little sticky tool and pick up these tiny little center berries. And all you need to do is just add them down. There's 4 little berries you can add right into the center, and this just adds a bit more texture and interest. You can see this sticky tool makes it super easy to pick them up. To finish it off, I love to go in with some slippery and wet lunar paste and dip a little paintbrush in, and I'm just going to hit the center with the berries using just this thin layer of lunar paste. This is gonna add a beautiful gold shine that is just stunning, and in my opinion, it's a little bit easier than cutting it out of gold cardstock. Clean out your brush with some water on a rag, and then you're ready to rock and roll. And check out that gorgeous shine. Lunar paste is a great addition to these little die cuts. Now I can add my leaves. If you need to cut them down in order to fit underneath, totally do so. Grab a little tweezers and start sticking these right underneath. I love all of the amazing detail this little pine branch has. I'll chop this one right down and I'll slip it underneath the opposite side. And check out how simple and beautiful that is. Of course, you could add this down to a project, but I just wanted to add it down here to show you how easily the assembly of the flowers is. I know there are dies on the market that have a million layers that are a little bit difficult to put together. I'm not too into that, so I've cut out pieces for the deer, and I want to show you how simple it is to put together. Before we get started putting it together, I'm just going to go in with some neutral colors for this deer and go right around and add a little bit of shading to give some more life to it. Again, this isn't a necessary step, but I find that it really brings a lot more character to your images to just add a little bit of shading. Starting off with these antlers, both of these have a little notch in them exactly where they're supposed to line up with the head. So just add a little bit of liquid glue to the bottom, and then you're going to go in and line it right up behind the head with that notch. It's super simple. Same thing with the opposite side. Line it up with the notch, and then your antlers will be perfectly even. All right, now every other little piece that you've cut out has little indents, so they should fit in perfectly like a little puzzle. So just add some liquid glue down to those spots, and then grab your little pickup tool and just lay them right down where they're supposed to go. My team made it super easy with those little notches to make sure that you're gonna be able to line them up easily. Last but not least, we'll add down his nose. Now there are little pieces you could inlay into the eyes, but to make it even easier, all you need to do is add a little bit of glue back here, take a little piece of black cardstock, and just line it up right behind the eyes. That's going to create nice black eyes super easily. And it's that simple to put together this deer head. I absolutely love how it looks. Like I said, you could leave it alone for a more masculine look, or you could go in with your flowers and start adding little bouquets to really bring it to life with the Christmas spirit. Let's talk about the stamp sets and coordinated dies. There are 3 clear photopolymer stamp sets in this release that are manufactured by Ranger. They're the same high quality photopolymer that you know and love, and they're 6x9 stamp sets, which is huge. There's lots of design space. And then Spellbinders created 3 coordinating die sets that cut out all of the images in the set with a nice white border. You guys have been asking for this for so long, and I'm so glad to finally bring them to you, so you no longer have to fussy cut out your images. And I also want to give a huge shout out to both companies for working together and coordinating their schedules, as it's not an easy thing to do, but I really appreciate it. I hope you guys do too, and if you support it, we can keep doing more things like this in the future. This first stamp set has some adorable winter critters. It's called Winter Woodland. I love these larger images like the bird on a branch and the deer with the cluster of flowers underneath it that can fill up an A2 size card really nicely. You also have things like these 2 little bears, which can be used all year long or can be great polar bears, this adorable deer up here, and of course this little winter Christmas rabbit. We got some bold sentiments that go along with the images, like we come bearing gifts, have a holly jolly Christmas, seasoned sweetings, and walking in a winter wonderland, and of course some different sentiments and gifts to accessorize. You can of course purchase the coordinating die set to go along with it, which will cut out these images just beautifully. It even cuts out little areas that are in between, which is really nice. It excludes the sentiments, however. I love this bird. It's got so much detail to it, and it fills out an A2 size card really nicely. And the really awesome part about this bird die is in the little areas in between that you usually couldn't be able to cut out with fussy cutting, it cuts it out with the die. So I'll line it up with an even border, tape it down to hold it in place, and then I'll run it right through the die cutting machine. And check this out. It cuts out the really little detailed areas that I never would have been able to cut out with the scissors, and that's the importance of having these coordinating dies. Next we have folk art ornaments. These are nice large ornaments, and I love all of the amazing little details you have in here. They are just stunning, and they'd be so great for coloring and getting in all of those details. We also have this great nutcracker down here, some string for your ornaments, and 2 different types of branches you can use. And these fill up an A2 size card just beautifully. There's also a coordinated die set to cut out everything in this set, including the different sentiments, which is really awesome. When it comes to the ornaments that have the same shape, like these guys, we made 1 die for each pair so that it cuts down on price point and makes it easier for you guys to purchase. Last but not least, this one is definitely a fan favorite. It's called Halftone Holiday. And the reason why I called it that, and I'll demonstrate this in a little bit, is that each one of these images is made up of a bunch of little dots. So all of this amazing shading and dimension you see in these images is exactly how it's gonna stamp, which is so cool. So it's minimal effort and you get just beautiful shading from it. I love these bold sentiments as well. You have happy holidays, deck of the halls, joy to the world, and Merry Christmas, as well as some sub-sentiments to use too. And again, there's a coordinated die set to cut out all of the images in the Halftone Holiday set, excluding the sentiments. To share a quick example, I wanted to share how these Halftone Holiday images stamp with this shading. Starting off with the poinsettia, I'm going to go in using a little bit of Bee Sting red ink and ink up the whole poinsettia. Now you can leave this as is, and it's going to have natural shading because of how the stamp is. However, I'm going to go in using a little bit of Game Over as well, which is a little bit darker, and just roll this color onto the edges. This is going to give a little bit of a darker color to even add more depth and dimension to the image. Then I'll stamp this right down onto my cardstock, giving it some good pressure to make sure the image transfers. And when we lift that off, check out the beautiful stamping and all of that shading you're able to get. You can see where there are more little dots in here, you get a much more shaded image, and it gives some natural dimension to the image. I wanted to do the same thing with the leaf images, starting off with a lighter color. Here I'm going in using Psych, which is this kind of yellow-green color, and then I'll follow it up using a little bit of Viper, which is this darker olive color, and add some shading by rolling my ink pad onto one of the edges. And again, to stamp this, I'll give it some good pressure, and you can really see that beautiful depth and dimension you get in those images. This is another reason why I love the licensing, because I totally wouldn't have been able to draw these, but they're one of my favorite sets. It's so beautiful. All right, so I've pulled the dies that I want to use out of the coordinated die set, and I want to show you just how easy it is to line these up. So just kind of find an area in the image that kind of lines up with the stamp where you can tell. Here, it's those 2 edges that I can really see. Then I'm going to go in with some mint masking tape. I love this stuff because even when you run it through your die cutting machine, it's not going to rip your cardstock. Then all you need to do is line it up and make sure there's an even white border all the way around, and then tape it into place so that it doesn't move when you run it through your die cutting machine. I'll do the same thing with these leaves, just making sure to line it up with an even border and then placing a piece of tape down so that it doesn't move. And it's going to save a ton of time to not have to do the fussy cutting and to just be able to easily die cut these out. And then I'll simply run this right through my die cutting machine. Then it's super simple to just pop these out, and they come out perfectly cut with a really nice white border. I love how detailed these cut out. It gives a nice clean line, and the white border isn't too thick, so it's really nice. Another great way to get more use out of your dies is to create an embossed background. For this, I'm using the universal plate system. I'm going to use the platform base and the platform top. Then I'll place in the embossing mat, which is this nice rubber mat. Then I'm going to use a piece of stark white cardstock, and I'm just going to spray this down a little bit with water. This is going to help it kind of bend and mold to the shape of the cardstock. I'll place this down at kind of an angle, and then I'm going to place down my Candy Stripes Coverplate die right on top. And this time I don't need the border since it's already cut to A2 size. Then I'm going to use the D adapter plate right on top, and then we'll run this right through our die cutting machine to emboss. So there you can see that beautiful embossing that it gives it. I love that subtle striped background that we're then able to add our image on top of. I'll adhere down the poinsettia with a little bit of foam tape for dimension. And then I've cut the leaves down so I can tuck them underneath the poinsettia to build this up and add a little bit of greenery to the image. All right, now let's move into the new Glimmer hot foil Christmas plates. I'm so excited to introduce some plates in the Glimmer line. These work along with your Glimmer hot foil machine and your platinum die cutting machine in order to use them. This is not gonna work with a laminator. That's a whole different type of foiling. This first set is called Joyful Christmas Sentiments, and it has some great hot foil plate sentiments and a die to cut them all out. The really unique part about this is that it's on one plate for each one, so it takes one pass to foil and one pass to die cut all of the sentiments at once. I'm going to use some red hot foil to do these sentiments. I like to have a little cutting mat on hand, and then I'm going to grab my hot foil plate, I'm going to place it right down onto my foil, and then I'm going to cut it down to the designated size. I like to use a little rotary trimmer like this one. I'll link down below to the one that I use, and it's really helpful to cut the foil super evenly and really smooth. Sometimes I have a hard time cutting them with scissors, so this has been a great option for me. All right, once your green light turns on, you're ready to start foiling, so place your hot foil plate down onto your surface with the design facing upward. Then you want to place the foil pretty side facing the pretty design side of your plate. So the colored side is going to go facing the design, and then you're going to place your cardstock right on top. Here I'm just using some stark white cardstock. And then you're going to use the thin shim and the spacer pad, place that on top, and then press the timer button. And once this turns solid and stops blinking, you're ready to go. All right, the light is solid, so I'm going to carefully remove this from the docking station. And then I'll run this right through my platinum die cutting machine, and you want to run it through slowly so that everything foils. It's a little awkward die cutting, but this time we're doing hot foiling. All right, then I'm just going to lift this hot foil plate right off and place it on my silicone mat on the side. And when we peel this off, check out the beautiful foiling that we get. I absolutely love how shiny it is. A little bit of overfoiling in the hot foil world is totally normal, and I recommend using a mono sand eraser to get rid of any overfoiling. You're just gonna run really lightly over some of those areas and it will remove it super easily. Down here you can see there's a little bit of excess, and we're just gonna go in there with the mono sand eraser and it gets rid of it really nicely. And then here's the coolest part. We take the coordinating die and simply line it up, and it's going to line up really easily with all the sentiments, again, leaving an even border all the way around. And then I'll tape it down to hold it in place so it doesn't move. And then I can simply pop all of these sentiments out, and you can see just how simple it was to get 5 different Christmas sentiments to add down onto your cards. I'll finish off this card by popping up the season's greetings sentiment on some foam tape, and I love how this turned out. And I love how this turned out with that really great stamped and shaded poinsettia, and finishing it off with that really great red hot foiled sentiment. The next Glimmer hot foil plate covers the entirety of an A2 size card and has this beautiful geometric design that represents snowflakes. I love all of the brilliant details on this plate, and wait until you see how it foils. For this, I'm going to use some gold hot foil. Again, I'll roll it out over my cutting mat. I'll place my cover plate on top to determine how much foil I need, and then again, use my rotary trimmer to cut right across the surface super easily. To foil, I'll lay down my foil plate right on the surface with the design facing up. Again, you're going to want to place the pretty side down facing the design of your foil plate. Place my cardstock on top, and then I'll place both of the plates and press the timer. And then slowly run it through your platinum die cutting machine so that it all foils really nicely. And once that's all hot foiled, check out the beautiful gold look that you get. And again, if there's any little excess areas, either rub it off. Sometimes it's loose enough to come off with your finger, and then sometimes you'll just need to go into some of the littler details and just wipe it off with your mono sand eraser. But it's no big deal, and it gives such a beautiful background. And keep your waste because you can use it on solid foil plates to transfer the negative down to your surface. To add extra interest, I love to add inks to my hot foil backgrounds. So here I'm gonna go in with a little bit of bee sting on a blending tool, and I'm just going to color this cardstock with the red ink. Now I like to start off by foiling on white cardstock because I find you get better foiled results on the smoother white cardstock, and then you can color it any color using inks. To add even more dimension, I'm going to go in using a little bit of Game Over ink, which is a darker maroon color, and I'm just going to ink blend around the edges to create a darker color. By going in and darkening the edges, it's going to draw your eye to the lighter part, which is in the center where we're going to add our image. To add even more depth, I'm going to go in using a little bit of Shady. I love this color of ink pad because on top of any other color, it really darkens it nicely. And you can see I'm just touching this to the edge just to get even more darkness around the edge. It blends in beautifully with that dark red and sits on top to create just an even darker red color right along the edge. Once I'm done blending, I'll go in with a dry cloth and buff off the foiling. The foiling is going to resist the ink, so you just want to remove any of the excess ink from the surface so that you'll get that nice, beautiful shine back. And I'll finish it off with the floral stag head that we created earlier in today's video. I'll finish it off with another joyful Christmas sentiment that says "Deck the Halls," and you can really see how beautifully everything comes together to create a nice card. I love the foil background with all of that inking to add tons of depth, and that floral stag head is just adorable to finish off the card. Next, I wanted to share the Ornament String Glimmer Hot Foil Plate and Die Set. Again, this is a great string of ornaments. I love the kind of swirls and playfulness of it, and it's got tons of detail in each one of those ornaments. And again, it has a coordinating die to cut out the image. I've already hot foiled it here, and you can see all of those beautiful details in the foiling, and I love that it goes across the length of an A2 size card really nicely. Now here I'm going to line up the coordinating die by making sure there's an even border and taping it down, and then I'll run it through my die cutting machine. I wanted to show this because the designers worked hard to make sure that all of these little loop-de-loops will also cut out, so you can place it on a card and you don't have a bunch of white space in between there. Here you can see how I used the ornament string hot foil plate, and I foiled it twice to create 2 rows of the ornaments and added down a joyful Christmas sentiment, and it creates a really simple yet elegant card with that beautiful foiling. You can also see how I used the ornament string and retro ornaments with stamping foam. Here I used the circle stamping foam and the regular rectangle stamping foam to get a really great stamped impression with those hot foil plates. This next Glimmer hot foil plate is called Retro Ornaments, and it's quite large to fill an A2 size card. It's got these really beautiful old-fashioned ornaments with lots of little details, and it has the die to cut it out once you've foiled. I'm going to use some of this silver hot foil, and then I'm going to grab out my rotary trimmer, and you just want to cut around some of the details, so you don't want it to overfoil. So I'm just going to cut off some of those little areas, and then I'm going to go in and trim around so we can use some of this foil. All right, and I'll lift this off and check out the beautiful detail and silver shine that we get in these ornaments. Then I can easily take the coordinating die. I love that we included these so that you can pop this up on top of an inked background. I'll line it up just the same as I have been, making sure there's a nice even white border, and then I'll run it right through my die cutting machine. I love just how perfectly and quickly it cuts it out. Now I want to create an inked background that I can put this ornament on. I'm going to bring in the double stick silicone craft sheet, and I'm going to use some of my ink pads to create sort of a palette of color. Starting off with a little bit of no diving, and you want a surface like this craft sheet that the ink is going to kind of bead up on and create little bubbles of color. Next I'll go in using a little bit of Crown Me, and then last but not least I'm going to use a little bit of Love Struck. These are some really great Christmas colors. These are some really great non-traditional Christmas colors that are gonna blend together beautifully. Then I'll take some water and spray it down on the surface. And again, you want the inks to kind of bead up like this, and then you're ready to start dipping your cardstock in. I'm gonna use a piece of stark white cardstock, and I'm just going to grab my paper and start dipping it right into the surface. I don't wanna leave it there too long. You can see I'm moving my cardstock around and dipping as I go. Now I'm going to heat set this with my Ranger heat tool to dry the first layer so we can add more texture to the surface. Alright, once it's dry quite a bit, I'm going to go back into some of these puddles of color, and I'm just going to kind of slap my paper down into it. I don't want to press too hard. That's going to kind of flatten these droplets. I want all of that amazing texture and depth in the background. So keep dipping it to get lots of texture. Alright, once I kind of have the background to an area that I like, I'm going to heat set it once again. But if you want to, you can keep building up these layers by just heat setting it in between and then building up to get more and more texture and dimension. I'll add this inked background right down onto a card base, and I'll add the ornaments right down on top. I love the shine of these. They really stand out beautifully, and I'm just going to cut them off right at the top edge. And then I'll use the Joy to the World sentiment that we foiled earlier. Again, I love that it does so many sentiments at once. It's especially helpful if you're making a bunch of the Christmas cards. And there we have the finished card using the retro ornaments and the joyful Christmas sentiments. I love this inked background and the beautiful hot foiled images on top. I hope you guys really enjoyed today's video, the cards we created, and taking an in-depth look at this Christmas release. I am so excited for you to get your hands on the coordinating stamps, dies, and the standalone dies to create your Christmas cards this year. Let me know down in the comments below which one of the cards and products were your favorite. I love to hear from you guys down there. And also in the description box, I'll have a link to the full release so you guys can check it all out. Thank you so much for spending your time with me. It means the world to me. And I'll see you guys soon in another card making and crafting video. Have a great day. Bye.